Unitarian Universalist way. And of course, our Christians, brothers and sisters, our kin out there around the world were also celebrating it too, including in Lahore, Pakistan. They were doing it in a wonderful little park where they invited also Muslim brothers and sisters to join them. But then a bomb went off right by a swing set, and it killed 72 people, including children, and it was an act of terror. So this last Wednesday, my friend Farah Khan, there's Farah. Some of you might know her. She's also running for the Irvine City Council. She's also the director of the interfaith organization that I belong to. And she organized an interfaith peace vigil. She asked me to say a prayer then. And I remember all I could think of was, oh God, another peace vigil, right? Yet one more that we go to. When will these acts of violence, when will these acts of terror, when are they ever going to end? And you know, it was a beautiful event. There were a couple of you that were there. Many people from different faiths spoke at the vigil. Some spoke of their fear and frustration, like I just voiced to you. Some spoke of standing up to terrorists. We've got to not let them win. But I remember at the end, Farah, she asked a really important question that really struck me. She says, I want to know why. I want to ask these people, what is it that makes you think that killing innocents will make things better? What makes you think that killing innocents will make things better? Kind of had to sit with that, because it's not a question you generally hear when asked about terrorists. And I think it's an important question to ask. You know, the purpose of terrorism is to create fear. That's why it's called terrorism. It's to exploit the media to create a sense of fear in the population and the government in order to achieve some short-term goal, such as driving someone out of a country. And it's also seen as prestige for a group if you're trying to show that you're support for. So see me, I can blow stuff up. I'm powerful. But here's the truth about terrorism. It works in that it does create fear, and sometimes it makes governments change. But it doesn't work in terms of creating long-term change, and it rarely drives anyone out. Instead, it makes governments retaliate, hurting more innocents. We get attacked, so they attack us, and it creates this cycle of violence. Think about this. Since the terrorist attack of 9/11, long time ago now, terrorism has not disappeared. In fact, it's gotten worse. Despite Homeland Security, despite greater awareness, the cutting back of civil liberties, despite the loss of privacy, acts of terrorism are up in the world. So obviously these tactics, they're just not working. And yet it continues. We continue to do the same things. I can't help but thinking, how's that working for you? Because it isn't. We're still caught in this cycle of violence around the world and even here at home. You know, one of my favorite quotes is actually, I think I skipped him accidentally. There we go. Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. That's what we do though, right? They bomb us, we bomb them, we just go back and forth, and we keep doing the same thing, and it's not changing anything. It's this kind of insanity that we go through. And in both cases, we might feel a little bit better, at least for a short time. A terrorist who has lost a loved one, faces a lifetime of unemployment, is disenfranchised, has nothing left to lose, so of course they're angry. When we're angry, we lash out, and maybe it makes us feel better. Ha, got you. And then the victims lash out, make themselves feel better. Ha, got you. Works for a little while, then the cycle comes around again. Again, how's that working for you? In our tradition of Unitarian Universalism, we ask tough questions. I love a good question that makes me think. Here we are in the land of the free. We have all these incredible freedoms that in some parts of the world are extremely rare. We have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, and we might not even like that one all the time. We have the right to make ungodly amounts of money. But what is the price that we pay for this freedom? Is it giving up our civil liberties? That right to privacy, as the FBI is asking? Or is it giving up a sense of security, of being safe, if Apple doesn't help the FBI? And neither of these feels like we're truly free. We're fearful we're not free. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, many of you know, of course, at the FBI, they found a back door. But it still asks the question, what is the price of freedom? And are we willing to pay it? So what are we to do? Well, of course we have these wonderful people to look for as examples. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, marching for civil rights. All those who stopped cycles of violence using nonviolent resistance. Is that going to work with terrorism? I honestly don't know that the same methods that they had will work. I just know that what we have isn't working. But what the brilliance of people like Gandhi and MLK have done is not just that they use nonviolent approaches to their insanities. Their insanities were segregation and colonialism, but they asked different questions. Excuse me. The problems of the 21st century might need a different approach. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me we need to ask different questions. And it isn't just about terrorism. I think anywhere where you find entrenched problems, you've got to start asking questions like, okay, is this still working for you? Because it doesn't seem to be. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts that wherever you find a problem that has been going on in society for decades or even hundreds of years, is that the governments or the people just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Homelessness, for example. That's just another one in our society. It's existed for a very long time, and it's been getting worse in the last decades. So who here has ever felt uncomfortable when faced with someone who is homeless? Yeah, right? There might be fear. That might be the discomfort. They're sort of unknown. Are they going to take advantage of me? Are they mentally ill and maybe violent? Because somehow we link those two things together, which is also a little bit of a problem. Are they on drugs? There might be frustration. Like you might look at someone and just feel uncomfortable because I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. I want to be compassionate, but I don't want to be taken advantage of. Is this the right thing to do? How will they spend the money? Oh my goodness. And then, of course, there's anger that might come up. Hey, I was enjoying my day shopping and suddenly I'm accosted by someone who's asking me for money. Then, of course, if you're of the progressive ilk, then you've got the liberal guilt that goes in there with that, right? If you're making you feel uncomfortable. I should be compassionate, but I'm angry. So I just want you to know that all of that is pretty normal, but it's not helping. I just want to take a brief look at the causes of homelessness. So what triggers it? Because most people think, when we think of homeless, we think of the chronically homeless. We think of someone who is lying in the street, passed out by drugs or alcohol, that kind of thing. But the reality is that that's only about 19 to 20% of the homeless that are out there. Job loss, relationship loss, high bills, abuse, all of these things lead to homelessness. And I'll bet you that just about every single person in this room has experienced one of these triggers, but for whatever reason, you had a nice safety net. Maybe it was family, you had some savings, whatever it was. But for the grace of God, go I, right? I know I have. So what do we do as a culture with people then who are homeless to solve this problem? Well, we make it illegal to park their cars, which is often their only form of shelter. We make it so that they can't hang out in stores or malls, although there's no other place for them to hang out. They don't have access to showers or bathrooms, and we get upset when they use the public facilities, and then we get upset when we take those away. They use the outdoor facilities. We pass vagrancy laws that gives fines or even jail time to those who are homeless, making their situations even worse with fines that they can't pay and an inability to hold a steady job. We're criminalizing poverty. For about 80% of those who are homeless, it is the inability to get a leg up, to get a foothold on that cliff that they're falling down, that keeps them in homelessness. And I've gone to city council meetings here in Costa Mesa around homelessness, and they made it clear that they felt it was the responsibility of charitable organizations, like churches, to take care of the homeless, not the government's job. And oh, by the way, could you please not use the public parks for feeding or helping them in any way? And so this cycle continues, right? Developers come in and they build high-rise expensive condos and apartments for people, taking out any low-income housing, driving up costs for housing for those who do have work but can't afford to live here. We keep the minimum wage low, even though most minimum wage jobs can't even remotely pay for housing here in Orange County. And then, of course, there's the homeless vets, the ones who gave their life, and often their sanity, to give us that security. They paid this huge price to keep us in those liberties that we do have, and yet they are left to beg in the streets. And again, this cycle continues. You know, I don't want to look at homeless people, and so I'm going to create laws and ignore their needs, which creates more homelessness, and then I'm still uncomfortable. How's that working for you? I think the problem, the way that we approach some of these quagmires, these intractable places, whether it's terrorism or it's homelessness, we tend to treat them as symptoms. We're not treating the causes that happen to these. We tend to think of terrorism as coming from religion, but it really doesn't. That's just adding fuel to an already burning fire. People resort to terrorism when they have really nothing left to lose, when they're no longer able to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when they have an entire generation growing up without the hope of jobs, families who have lost loved ones from being bombed, rights being curtailed by governments. When all those things happen, you get angry, and that anger goes someplace. Terrorism, in my opinion, is the cost of not having enough freedom in your life, of not having freedom to live your life. And if the causes of homelessness are that we've created a culture where the desires of the powerful and wealthy overshadow the needs of the poor, homelessness, in a sense, then is the cost of having too much freedom. Sort of like, if you can't keep up, then just get out of the way. If we're going to enjoy all these wonderful freedoms that we have today, from freedom of religion to freedom of speech to the ability to earn ungodly amounts of money, then those are the costs that we are paying. But I think that there's a different way to pay those costs. I believe that the real cost of freedom is responsibility. And I'm quoting Albert Hubbard, who was an American philosopher. Responsibility is the price of freedom. Now, we could sit here and argue all day about whether or not the U.S. has had responsibility on creating terrorism in the world. We can argue about whether or not we've had any responsibility in creating homelessness, but that isn't going to help anything. We're all human beings, and we need to do what we can to create peace. We do this by helping create prosperous areas so that terrorism can't flourish. Because you don't think about terrorism when you've got your friends and family have jobs and homes and people to love. And you do that by creating peace, not more violence. Now, I don't exactly know how to do this, but I do know that what we've been doing hasn't been working. If you look at an example of homelessness in Salt Lake City, they've eradicated homelessness. And how they did it was by being kind and generous. They bought up old hotels, they converted them to efficiency apartments, and they said, here you go. No caveats, no ifs, ands, or buts. There you go. And it's gone. Or just about. I think they have 15 left. They started with about 1,600. And they're still working on those 15. This is the chronically homeless. When it comes to homelessness, we need to create a world where people, the wealthy and the powerful, aren't the only ones who get a voice. Now, we can't legislate responsibility. I think we try sometimes, but I don't think it works out well, because then again, you're curtailing freedoms. I think it has to become a national culture. You know, Maya Angelou reminds us at the beginning of the service that it's only love which sets us free. And that's what I mean by responsibility. It's just to love the world. Responsibility is an act of love as much as it is of courage. That's one of the things that I love about Unitarian Universalism. Because boy, do we love our freedoms, right? We're big on freedom. The thing is, Unitarian Universalism, it doesn't ask me to take on the responsibility of others. That's not what we're asking. Rather, it asks me to act responsibly in the face of these insanities, homelessness and terrorism. Our fourth principle, if you want to know where all of our principles are on the back of that piece of paper you were given when you're given here, our fourth principle states that we have a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Free and responsible. Because freedom without responsibility is simply hedonism. It becomes all about me. Because our seventh principle also tells us that we are in this interdependent web of existence. That what happens to one happens to us all. That we're part of this interdependent web. So if I'm going to have my freedoms, then I must be concerned about the freedoms of others. And that is the cost of freedom. And so we are called to act responsibly. And believe me, that doesn't mean that we have to do it all. The reality is that, particularly here, you know, even as Unitarian Universalists, we're a pretty small movement compared to many others. We're a small but mighty minority, and we aren't alone in this. Our job is to ask the questions and to keep moving people along, to think differently, to act responsibly. And so we show up at peace vigils. We collect goods for homeless vets. We learn more about these issues as we can and begin to ask questions. Eve Garrow from the ACLU is going to be with us today after church to help us ask different questions, to help us learn about homelessness here in Orange County and the different ways that we can act responsibly. And we do these things not because it's going to solve the problems right now, but because it's the responsible thing to do. Because we love our freedoms and we want to keep them, but not at the cost of the freedom of others. You know, think about it. What if everyone worked toward having everyone else having enough, rather than having more than everyone else? What if we worked toward building peace and prosperity in the Middle East rather than bombing terrorists? I just can't help but thinking that there would be no more poverty. There would be no more war. Because you know what? I don't want to have to go to another Costa Mesa City Council and listen to them tell me that it's my job to fix the problem, not theirs. I don't want to have to go to another peace vigil after an act of terror. I'd like them to end. So I act as I can, each of us individually. I do what I can. I ask hard questions. And to me, that is the cost of freedom. Blessed be. Shalom, salam, and amen.